Hi, good evening, everyone. If you're from India or hi, otherwise in general, if you're joining us from somewhere else, thanks for your time to join this particular webinar. We'll give it a minute as people would join in the session. Meanwhile, we can just maybe put down on the chat. There's a Q&A box there. You can just put down where you're joining from so that we know uh, how many people we have from which part of the world and cities, right? So you can go to Q&A and then put your message there. I'm saying that I'm joining from Bangalore. So Kathmandu, okay. Nepal, okay. Nepal, wow. Three of you are from Nepal. Nice. Bangalore, good, good. Kolhapur. Okay, we'll just start in a minute. Maximum, so okay, that's good. So I'm just going to put down a poll on the screen. You can just give that poll to understand. So we want to kind of understand what kind of audience we have right now. We are having like freshers or some of the experienced folks and so on. We're going to put that on the screen now. You can take that particular poll and then we'll start after that. So yeah, go ahead and you can just put down how much experience you have in the DevOps ecosystem. Okay, so I think we have good. Okay, I think I'll just publish the result now. So as we can see, right, most of the folks are somewhere in the middle of their journey. Like you are between 1 to 5 years of experience. So I think that is perfect for this particular webinar to get for this webinar what we are going to cover today, right? So I'm just going to start the discussion with one of the post which I saw from Rajdeep earlier, and we'll do an intro after that. So I was kind of, I mean, we were part of the LinkedIn community earlier, and then when I saw one of his posts, which I'll just put on the screen now, and you would be able to see that Rajdeep has kind of put down this thing, his experience, right, when he has taken some interviews there, right? And he has put down that very specific point that unless there are basics, right, the advanced topics does not make sense, right? And that is something which kind of interested me to kind of have Rajdeep on this particular session so that we can discuss his understandings and his learnings and his uh, basically the overall experience what he has, right? And then what he can share with others, right, so that other people can kind of do not make the similar mistakes, and then we start building the basics from the very beginning, right? So with that, I would like to welcome Rajdeep here. Rajdeep, can you? Yep. So welcome Rajdeep on this
Hey, hi.
particular webinar of ours. Um, so yeah, I mean, just want to start with maybe your quick introduction of yours, like how was your experience, how was the journey in the DevOps world so far? So can you just tell us about that?
Hi all. Thanks, Dipendra, for having me. I'm really excited to see people joining from different places. So, hi everyone. Uh, so, a quick intro. I am basically leading the DevOps effort at Lenskart. Uh, uh, been close to 15 years of experience in this industry. I started as I would say a system administrator, right? At that point of time, there was nothing like a DevOps term at that point of time. And I remember in my first 6 months of my job was only to monitor logs, right? So I just had to look at the black screen, and there were a lot of logs coming in. And my seniors used to train us, what is the meaning of those logs. Although I doubt, some of them didn't knew the complete meaning of all those logs. But uh, as I slowly matured into more um, uh, tech stacks, right? I understood that these starts might be a bit boring, right? But they have a bigger impact, once you are dealing with bigger systems, right? So uh, I this was my first company. I don't know if this is still there or not. The name was ACL Wireless. It was an SMS platform. And from there I moved to, so it was a completely SMS protocol based SMSC kind of provider. From there I wanted to try out, HTTP based services, right? That was booming at that point of time. So I moved to a company called Monster.com. It was the India division. And that time, there was the primary web server was Apache, right? And there were different problem statements you had to deal with when you were dealing with a lot of traffic, right? So we had to evolve architectures. We went with a concept called as front back Apache server, so different things we had to try it. We had to deal with a lot of basics. Memcache was pretty early that point of time. Facebook was maturing Memcache. uh, so from there, slowly I started moving into different kind of organizations. My last one was an IM based company called Nimbus, right? It was the first IM messenger platform that was introduced before WhatsApp. So that was a different experience. And now I am with the e-commerce company Lenskart. So uh, I have seen a different kind of architectures, have different seen different scale of problem statements. But I think what helped me, deal with different kind of scale was the fundamental knowledge of how I had seen these systems, right? Now I don't think so. Any engineer hardly patches kernel. Maybe they go, maybe who are working with the companies like AWS in the data center environment, they would go and patch the kernel. But we used to patch the kernels even, right? We used to, manage the data centers even. So I started with a very small setup. Maybe it was, I think, a 4 to 5 machine setup in my first company to, a billion, traffic per day, right? So I think that is why I posted this, because I have been taking interviews for quite some time now, and I saw the basic, mistake, or I would say the inclination is towards advanced topics, right? And this is where I saw that there is a bit of disconnect, right? That we are moving to a more sophisticated software layer, and somewhere we are missing out the basic constructs on top of which this software runs.
Okay. Thank you. That was very interesting to hear about you, Rajdeep, your journey. I just want to share quickly about myself, and what is my experience overall in this industry, right? My name is Nipendra, and I'm founder of Cloud Yuga, and started my career in 2004, like 20 years kind of now. And again, my first job was sysadmin, as Rajdeep had, right? And then So that's like I did it for around a year, and then I joined Red Hat as support engineering. So earlier, of course, when you think about support engineering, you don't see that, okay, what you going to do in support, right? But luckily, because it's Linux, right? So that was a dream company as well for me at that point of time, right? So what in the support, what happened is I kind of learned about everything in Linux, right? Because we had to kind of deal with different kind of issues, right? From kernel to file systems to performance to UI and everything. So those 3 years basically were very important, where I kind of learned Linux in and out there. And then one thing I did basically in every 2 years, I try to change my career. I mean, the systems domain. But then I started with the sysadmin. Then I moved to the the kernel development after that to a startup. Then to performance engineering. So again, started the systems area and focused continue on this particular path where I'm kind of increasing my knowledge systems domain. And then in 2015, I wrote a book on Docker and then published official intro course on Kubernetes for the CNCF Foundation, just taken by more than 2 lakh users across the globe. That's kind of background I have. And for the last 7 years, I've been running Cloud Yuga, and we train people on containers, Kubernetes, and then we run some kind of boot camps as well, which I'll touch upon towards the end of it, right? So, but let's kind of jump into this session where we kind of try to put more stress on the fundamentals, what is there, right? So, Rajdeep, from your perspective, right, what is the most important responsibility a DevOps engineer is going to have, right? And then, yeah, so.
Yeah, so I mean, like I would say that I have gradually progressed to a DevOps engineer, right? So during this journey, I think some of the basic rules remains the same, be it a system admin or a DevOps engineer, and that number one rule is that your system should be up and running, right? Resiliency is something you have to work on, right? You always have to keep finding which are your single point of failures, uh, which are where there are capacity issues, work on observability, alerting systems, right? And slowly start making the systems auto scalable, right? So you might start with some fixed systems, then you as the problem statement keeps on growing, you make them more flexible, right? uh, Similarly, I think one of the another key aspect of DevOps is that you are bringing a set of tool chain to basically make the environment more collaborative, right? So, uh, you know, so tools are basically an enabler in this, where slowly the other teams get the confidence to interact more with the DevOps engineer, right? So, the other teams, the engineering teams, are a customer to a DevOps engineer, and they are supposed to keep taking feedbacks from them, and accordingly they start analyzing those problem statement and work on a alternative solution, right? uh, Similarly, there are some basic ground rules, like your tagging should be in place, or you are working on some basic security constructs, right? You are always measuring all your stuff, like from velocity to cost to your resiliency, right? Everything in for a DevOps should be measurable, right? And should be transparent to other stakeholders.
I think we can now measure the downtime effect, right? So we can actually convert them into dollar value, right? So for example, if a system is down for 5 minutes, you may lose like millions of dollars as well. I think I heard there, right? So think about an example similar, like if you're running this Flipkart big billion day, or Amazon is running their whatever they call it, right? So if your system is down for 5 minutes, right, it is going to cost them, of course, first of all, the money. Second is reputation and so on, right? So basically, they should not go down at any point of time. Correct. So now, being said that, right now, let's say if we kind of try to look at the exceptional DevOps engineer kind of a thing, right, who get paid kind of good amount of money because of their skill set, right? So can we kind of try to bucket the DevOps engineer in different kind of um, buckets there, right? Like how they kind of progress. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think any DevOps engineer or an organization which is slowly starting to adopt DevOps, I think the first thing to start is uh, taking some small initiatives or small automations, right? So the DevOps engineer is always, taking feedback, as I mentioned earlier, is
Mm-hmm.
taking feedback from his stakeholders. There would be a lot of pain points they must be having. Somebody might have to maybe wake up at middle of a night to deploy something. Somebody might, the system might be down due to some disk issues, or somebody might be needing help into some sort of notification, in their let's say if their API performance degraded. So that is where the interaction first happens, right? Uh, it's I would say a combination of technology and interpersonal skills, uh, because if you are just working on the tooling aspect, you will miss on the interaction, because the problem statements are first that a DevOps engineer will start picking up, right? And based on those problem statements, he will start building those solutions, right? He might start with a very basic tool like Jenkins, right? So that is where you can bucket those engineers as like a app ops engineer, right? Which are working
Okay.
very closely with the application teams, right? They are understanding the problem statements, they are working on the ad hocs, they are trying to build solution to reduce those ad hocs, right? And uh, in parallel they are also working on some future initiatives, right? So that is where maybe the next bucket comes in, where you might be
Mm.
having some a specialized team like a DevOps center of excellence team, right?
Okay.
Which might be working on the broader goals, right? That might be uh, implementing infrastructure as code, right? uh, that might be working on some configurational management tool, right? Or they might be analyzing where the company's culture is shifting, or how to drive the company towards, let's say, containerization culture, right?
Mm.
Or bringing in tools like Kubernetes, right? Or maybe adoption of cloud from, so there is a I mean, these are the teams which are, I would say, also aligned with how the business is shaping up, right? And they understand or weigh their decisions based on the company objectives or the OKR, right? And they also work with these app ops team to basically understand their problem statement and try to find a middle solution, right? Which is a win-win for both these organizational level, as well as the app ops team and the stakeholders, which are the developers, right? And I think the more matured phase of, I would say, the DevOps Center of Excellence team will be a platform engineering team, right? Which
Okay. Okay.
actually, once, so initially when you start, uh, you will have less bandwidth to work on. You might, the company might be, or the team might be acquiring some tools, external tools, when
Mm.
the scope, they have very limited bandwidth to work with, as well as they will have more agendas to cover. So they might procure some tools from some SaaS company or things like that. But eventually when the scale grows up, no company can sustain into SaaS model, or there are caveats maybe. In that case, and there might be bigger problem statements to achieve, or the teams might be getting all the other teams onto a single platform. So in that case, these teams will start building internal tools, right?
Okay.
And which will be maybe more conducive towards that company's problem statements or the engineering team's problem statements. Some of them might be, they might build it maybe in such a generalized manner that that might be applicable to other companies as well. They might go ahead and open source those tools. So,
Okay.
yeah, these are the phases,
Okay.
uh,
Got it. Got it.
yeah.
Sure. So I think one question I have there. So let's say you are running production critical system, right? So if you have to kind of pick up some of your team members, right, that who should be kind of responsible for that, right? So I mean, what kind of qualities you would see in that, right? Like whom are the person whom you can trust, saying that okay, now yeah, you can take the production system under your control and do that, right? So what kind of first of all, what kind of things you would have in those persons to kind of select for that particular role?
Okay, so I think the requirement or the expectation changes, based
Okay.
on what is the maturity of that team is, right? Uh, so somebody who is just starting on this journey, right? I mean, like I would have, I would expect him to understand the problem statements, right? Have a strong basic knowledge, right? Because the system is small, but there might be maybe less people or less time to actually give him a download, right? Or maybe
Mhm.
let him explain everything, right? So in that case, he should be good at troubleshooting things, right? Picking up things
Okay.
on his own, right? Uh, he might have, he might have the knack to basically do some, implementation, right? Or he might have done some project on implementation, right? Using maybe tools like Jenkins and all, right? Not maybe too advanced, but
Okay.
getting that mindset here that he could derive at a solution, if there's a given set of problem, right? So once a company matures, right, they might be already working on maybe certain tool sets, right? Because if you have a bigger infrastructure, you can't do a one-to-one administration of these machines, right? Even if you are in a data center or a VM infrastructure or a containerized infrastructure, in that case, you need to have, you know, uh, some exposure to automation, right?
Okay.
And that is where these tools come into the picture. You might have, if you have certain scripting knowledge, it is good to have, right? uh, because maybe in future you might have to do some task which requires you to use maybe uh, some REST API call, or maybe build something, right?
Mhm.
Or even maybe just a like a small alert, right? Generating a small Python script to generate an alert,
Got it.
right?
So my
Similarly,
so my question
yeah, yeah.
so my question basically, I mean, coming towards that, right? I was looking like, so I mean, when somebody kind of look really into production servers, right? I mean, I believe you would be expecting them that person knows things in and out, right? Like you would not give somebody just like the access to the production and say that okay, now you are the in charge, right? So I believe you would
Absolutely,
check for the
absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
like, see, a level of confidence, and I think that's where you basically check the candidate during the interview process. What is the troubleshooting skills? You might throw him
Correct.
some couple of scenarios to see how they would approach a problem statement. Uh, you might be giving him some tricky situations, right? Or
Correct.
you might be, if you are a company who has maybe adopted certain tool sets already, like Terraform
Mhm.
or Docker or Chef or Ansible, whatever, right? You might be checking him not to very advanced level, depends on the experience you are seeking out. From a basic knowledge to maybe an advanced level, you might be checking on these tools, right? That how would how much in-depth knowledge he has, right? And especially
Yeah.
when you are working with operating systems, you will check on the knowledge, that how
Hmm.
how would you approach an operating system problem or a network related problem, right?
Right, right. So when you talk about these strong fundamentals, right? So what kind of tools technology you're referring there, right? Like the core of it, right? Of course, then things can be built on top of it, right? So what are those core features or core tools which you would um, consider as a strong fundamentals things somebody need to have?
So, so again, it depends on what kind of what is the stack right now,
Hmm.
on which you are working, right?
Of course.
There might be some teams who are still working on bare metals, right?
Hmm.
There might be teams who are working on the cloud space, right? There might be VM, there might be containers. So this fundamental knowledge, changes or matures from platform to platform. So let's say that somebody is there on VM or somebody is there on their data center environment. He needs to basically, as I mentioned, troubleshooting is a very important skill, and that is where I would expect him to, if we are dealing with Linux operating systems, I would expect him to know that how to check the disk, you know how to check, how many inodes are available in the system, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe uh, how to check which log file is associated with which program, right? Because there could be hundreds of server, and he he will have to basically do a deep dive. He should have the tool sets to basically find out, that which service is which call is coming from where, right? So similarly, some of the I would say, kind of Swiss Army knife kind of tools like Netcat, right, or Traceroute, or TCP dump, Wiresharks, right? These
Hmm.
are LSOF. I still use these tools day in and day out, right? So, these help you to basically, extract information from the systems where you don't have any information about, right?
You had a very good point there, right? The fundamentals would change depending on the role you are in. So I think that is there. So let's talk about in terms of container and Kubernetes ecosystem. For example, let's take that example because there's something people are trying it out and then using it in productions and so on, right? So so let's say somebody skips the basics, right, and jumps to Kubernetes directly, correct? So what would happen in that case, right? So if you don't know the basics, right, and then you just start using Kubernetes and so on, and I think you mentioned that in the post as well, right? That those are high level construct, right? So those kind of definitely going to kind of create some kind of problems, right? And understanding of that, how to connect the dots is going to become challenging, right? So what's your thought on that, right? Does it, I mean, kind of, I mean, yeah, what do you think about that particular part?
Yeah, so I mean, like, as we are. I think more and more tools are coming, which are very sophisticated and scalable. A lot of automation comes baked into these softwares. Uh, it is becoming increasingly challenging for the engineers to basically troubleshoot these systems, right? And why? Because there is a API layer written on top of all these operating system
Hmm.
and the hardware layer, right? So uh, if you so let's take an example of containers, right? So it's nothing but a run C program, right? So uh, you can build your own container system, right? So if you don't know uh, where there is corruption into a container image, that could be a problem, right? If you don't know how to scan these, so I'm talking this in terms of the security, right? So uh, as encapsulated programs, right? So while you are working on these, if you're not scanning them for security things, right? Some modules which might be exposed, or if you are making, let's say, very heavy images, and you are just launching it on these orchestration platforms. that could become big issue, right? Similarly, let's say if you launched an application or a container on top of any container orchestration platform like Kubernetes, right? How it is misbehaving, right? You would not come to know, right? Like in our case, in our infrastructure, we don't even allow port 22 access on these worker nodes, right? So there is no connectivity to the worker nodes, right? uh, in that case, how would you debug, right? So you need to know how to basically capture packets, right, from these containers on the network side of things, right? You need to know what is the meaning of those captured packets, right? How to analyze them, right? If let's say that here, so in Kubernetes, right, there are different CRDs, right? So so Kubernetes platform can be extended, and you can use different kind of storage layers at the back end, right? So there is a basically a software layer which is interacting or provisioning the this storage layer for you. Now, if let's say that you have run the command and still it is not working, right?
Correct.
You should know how you should know how to analyze these logs, right? You should go to these API servers or the Kubernetes logs to analyze what could be the problem statement, and slowly start digging deep into where the problem is, right? How where the interaction is failing, right?
Mhm.
uh, it might even require going inside the pod to basically sometimes check the
Correct.
connectivity, right? So and this becomes very even more challenging when there are maybe thousands of similar containers which are running in parallel, right? They might have a cascading effect if you change something, right? So if
Yep.
you're, let's say, patching your cluster, right? So once, so in DevOps, this is also very important task that you need to patch the systems for security updates, right? But with a running system, let's say you set up a Kubernetes cluster, everything is good and fine, right? But what about when you have to patch the system for security updates? Sometimes there are urgent updates you need to factor in, right? Sometimes there are upgrades coming in the Kubernetes version, right? If you don't know what could go wrong, and you will simply go ahead and upgrade it, uh, all the things will fall apart, right? The applications will go left and right. Then you need to
Right.
basically see how and where the things went wrong. So I think uh, uh, I think having a way through the problems, right? uh, uh, is much more important, than the platform itself, right? If you don't know the
Okay.
basic architecture of, let's say, Kubernetes, you will find a lot of problems there, right? There might be issues
Sure.
with DNS, right?
Yeah, DNS
Let's
is
say,
the problem in the
yeah,
in Kubernetes.
let's
Correct.
say that you are a company who started scaling up, and suddenly you see there are DNS queries failing, right? And there might be maybe 10,000 or lakhs of containers which are coming into your system, right? And suddenly you're not able to understand that your DNS is not getting resolved. And upon debugging, you will come to know that, okay, your DNS pod is overwhelmed, right? But to find out that, you need to measure the performance of that DNS server, right?
Correct. So let's hear some of the war stories, right? That's the most interesting part of this particular session, I believe, right? So if you can share some of the cases, right, where the problem looks so big, right? But when you try to debug it, find the root cause, right? You kind of understood a very basic problem, and if your basics were correct, right, you could easily figure that out, right? So it happened with me multiple times. I just want to kind of maybe hear from your side as well, and I'll talk about one of the use case which I had. So if we just talk about that particular war stories, right, like influence card or previous sessions or previous companies or anywhere else, right, which you say that, okay, if I knew the basics, this would have been just fixed in one go, but it took like weeks time to just kind of figure that out. So yeah, any interesting part you have there?
Okay, there are a lot actually. So I
Nice,
think we
nice.
all engineers have made a career out of it. I have personally made career out of asking questions, right? Uh, so there are a lot of them, right? So I'll start with the basic, right? And this is something which I asked even during the interview, right? So somebody asked me, what is the question? So I thought, I'll brief you in some of the talk. So there was a case, where in our production system, right? So the logs were filling up too fast, and
Mhm.
as a evasive step, what we did was that you know some engineer actually went ahead and took a backup and moved that log. That time we didn't had AWS or anything, so he just took zipped and transferred the file to a different server, and he just deleted the file from there, right? So after deleting, still, the things were the same, and we are slowly reaching that critical point to a place where our database system could have crashed, right? And upon a lot of, analysis and probing, right, of the engineer who did that, so we came to know that what all steps he did, and then we realized, okay, he didn't pass a SIG hub, right? To the process that was writing the log file. So it never actually reinitialized, or it didn't change the file descriptor, right? And when we took a restart, or the complete disk usage actually, came down to normal. So this is something which I asked, that how would he respond in that situation? Uh, Similarly, there was a case, it was, I would not say it was a easy case. It was a case where, uh, an engineer actually accidentally restarted Cassandra on all the cluster nodes, right?
Okay.
So, so that was a very heavy, traffic Cassandra system. But I think
Uh-huh.
that was the beauty of Cassandra, that from one node we were able to recover the entire cluster. Um Similarly, I think at Lenscard also we had a story, right? So that's when we first actually tried our hands on Kubernetes. Uh, the mistake was that we started with a search engine, right? And
Okay.
we started with the PVC, right? And it was a solar cloud actually set up.
Okay.
And what happened, that everything was running fine once we moved to the solar cloud setup. Uh, but these pods actually were provisioned into different, AZs, right?
Mhm.
And once the primary actually, the main solar, right? So config that actually crashed, and it took a failover to the other node, right?
Mhm.
It couldn't find the data because the PVC was in different AZ,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So we took a big downtime because of this, and that is where actually this was an incident where we took a step back, you know, in our
Mhm.
Kubernetes journey, and we reanalyzed our strategy, and slowly started picking up application which were not maintaining any particular state or PVC,
Great per
right?
se. Yeah, yeah. I'll also share one use case there, right? So, I mean, it's my customer's use case per se, right? So what was happening is they had a file system, right? And they were trying to create a lot of small files. Now, these small files basically, as you know, so what is happening is when they create a lot of small files, they after a point of time they could see space in the hard disk, right? But they cannot create more files. So we could not figure. I mean, the customer would not figure out what is happening there, right? That there are space, but I cannot create files. So what was the kind of reason there, right? And then it kind of went into iterations and so on. Then we realized that they have, because of a lot of small files, they have consumed all of their inode numbers when they what they have on the file system. So I think I talked about file item number also earlier, right? It's a kind of a pointer which says that where your data on the hard disk is. So typically you're going to have one inode number per file. That's true. And then when you format a file system, you're going to so there's some kind of a algorithm they have using which you get fixed number of inode numbers in the beginning, unless you say that, okay, I'm going to create a file system with a lot of files I'm going to put in there. So you can put an option there, I want a lot of files in that, so I'll increase the inode numbers there. And that was like a basic thing, right? I mean, if you knew that how to format a file system, this kind of issue kind of could be avoided very easily. So that is where I think that the basics of the Linux, basics of
I'll share
your,
you one more incident,
sure, sure,
right?
yeah,
So I mean, like now, discs are kind of very cheap. So that I am talking about a time where discs were very very measurable and in fixed slots, right? So
right.
that point of time, uh, I was tasked to basically. So in Monster, they were building. You know and they're in-house actually moving the storage component, right? Something like a they were maintaining a backup, a DR, right? So
Mhm.
we had to basically format a lot of storage, disk drive in parallel, right? And what we are trying is that we were trying to optimize or maybe get more juice out of the storage, right?
Mhm.
So by default in Linux systems, if you format a disk drive, right? So 5% is reserved for the root user, right, or the super user, right? It's reserved
Right.
5%, right? This can get very expensive if you are dealing with very high capacity disk, right? So you can try
Mhm.
that. I mean, like if you format a 1 TB drive, you are going to lose a lot of space, right? That will you will not be able to see it, right? So basically, there was a switch in your MKFS uh, where you can define that percentage. So if you move that percentage to zero, you can reclaim. I would say not 100%, but at least 99% of or maybe 99.6% or 5% of the disk capacity you can reclaim, right? So it's a good hack for engineer who is trying in FinOps space as well. He can basically reclaim a lot of disk space like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, correct. So this is kind of, these are things when you kind of practice and understand more internal things, we can figure those out. Yeah, correct. So now I think, I mean, we have a lot of people who are, I mean, who are in their mid career, right? 1 to 5 years of care there, and I think they would be looking for some kind of career move down the line and so on. So you want to understand some of your questions. So for example, when you take these interviews, right? What kind of question do you ask to kind of probe those basics, right? If you can share some of those, I think it would be helpful for the people who are joining this particular webinar. So I'm just kind of say that, okay, yeah.
Sure. I think, as I mentioned, for, yeah, so the question, I mean, like changes from, experience level to experience level. So
Yes,
somebody
of
who is
course, of course.
into, let's say, 5 years of experience, right? He's moving into a senior DevOps kind of role, right? So here the understanding is uh, more that he will take initiative, right? He will be able to
Okay.
drive a lot of things, right?
Mhm.
And when he has to drive a things, he has to basically build those solutions, right? He has to evangelize those solutions, right? So I try to grill him. I'll maybe give a scenario, right? I can give you an example. Let's say that uh, I have asked some of the engineers that let's say that AWS auto scaling group. So it's a cloud related question, right?
Sure, sure.
Let's say AWS ASG is not working as expected, right? And the CTO wants to build an ASG kind of software, right?
Mhm.
So what all things feature do you think it might have, or how will you approach building the solution,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Right. So usually, the engineers, they will first start with that I will do this, I will do that, right? There are some of them actually who would first question, right? that why do you think it's a problem, right? And why does the CTO feels there might be some request he might have, right?
Hmm.
So he will first try to get more into understanding the problem statement, right? That why do you think, right? How, what, why, right? So uh, if the problem statements are not correct, right, he will land into maybe a wrong solution. So I think
Hmm.
information gathering, right, is very important into that role, uh, because I think the tooling, more than the tooling, I think understanding the problem and then backtracing, right, or reverse engineering, and slowly coming into a a tool set of tool sets is what makes sense, right? Because choice of tool matters on
Very
where
much.
the company stands, right? You might implement Kubernetes in a company where there is just you as a single person,
Hmm.
right? You might have you might be spending the whole time firefighting, right? So would you choose a Kubernetes for a two service, or just spin up a
Okay.
VM and you know let be
Correct.
it and have a Jenkins to deploy on it, right? So it totally depends on the mindset of that engineer. So I try to check the mindset, how he will approach a problem statement. I might give him, some troubleshooting, questions that, okay, let's say that, this machine crashed, and you have to build or recover this machine. What will be the
Hmm.
fastest way to do it, right?
Right.
Or maybe if some engineer is working in a data center environment, I would ask him
Hmm.
question relevant to his current job role, right? That in a data center, if he has faced, or if he's saying that he has faced an issue, I would ask him that what all things you did, right? And I will slowly start going deep into his solutioning and try to see that how well he can scale that solution, right? I'll
Yeah.
take him from a data center to maybe a cloud environment and maybe a Kubernetes environment, or maybe even a serverless environment, and try to see that is his thought process working in such a situation. He might not be aware of those tools and technology, but maybe he's asking the right questions, or maybe he's thinking in the right direction, right? Some of them even tell
Yeah.
me
So
that I don't know, right? So that's absolutely fine, right? You need not be an expert, but you can slowly pick up things, right? So basically, I try to see that how well he's able to mold that solution.
so not worried about a specific tool per se, right? You are more focused on basically how somebody approaches the problem. Correct. If I have got that right.
Yeah, because
So
see, we started with Chef in our company, right? Because we
okay.
were familiar with Chef, right? One along with another of our colleague, we had already worked on Chef, right? And we brought in Chef and Lenskart, right? But slowly, when we started scaling out, we saw some issues down the line, right? And
Hmm.
slowly, it was becoming tech debt. It's not that Chef is a bad tool, or it can't scale. The way it had been structured, right? We had structured it, right? And slowly, the expertise was limited to V2, right? So we started looking out for an alternative tool which could replace Chef, or maybe tools which had a more active community at that point of time, right? uh, so that is the thought process. It's not that we pick up a tool and it is you will continue till your
That is
journey,
true.
right? So you need to basically start kind of reassessing yourself, right? That where do is it really worth the effort? You might be putting in a lot of management cost into maintaining that tool, and still
Hmm.
it is not giving that cultural boost, right? Because you might be sitting in a center, and a developer might be always asking you for peer review, and he might be you might be giving a training to a lot of them, right? Still the traction is not picking up because they don't have understanding of the tool, right? Because see, DevOps is an inclusive program, right?
Hmm.
If the adoption of the tools and technology is not spanned across the engineering and sometimes even beyond
Yeah.
engineering, things
It's
won't
kind of
take up.
waste. Correct, correct. And on a similar line, let's say if you want to just kind of judge for the basics, somebody just like fresher comes in, right? So of course you don't expect them to kind of know about tool in detail, right? But what would you expect from them? Like it's a fresher is joining, or you're interviewing a fresher, right? Or your team is interviewing the freshers, right? So what kind of things you would check on them, right? So can you just put a light on that as well?
I think without a doubt basics, right? I would
Hmm.
maybe check his knowledge of the operating system, right?
Hmm.
Most of the companies they work with Linux operating systems, right?
Right.
Some of them might work on Windows, but that again
Very less.
depends on company to company. The fresher might check the JD of the company, what is their
Hmm.
exact requirement, right? uh, then he should have a good understanding of protocols, right? HTTP versus HTTPS, right? uh, then how is a packet flowing from your browser to your server, the whole flow, right?
Okay.
uh,
Nice. Very good.
uh, he must have I'm not expecting him to know a lot of depth into ciphers and all, right? But
Okay.
uh, how would if you have to basically there is more load coming onto the server, right? You have just one
Hmm.
box. How would you encounter that problem statement?
Right.
So
How do
things
you
like,
debug it? How do you?
yeah, and let's say that you have 50 servers in your infrastructure, right? How
Hmm.
would you find out, which of them has Debian installed in them, which of them has CentOS installed in them, you know, which of them have maybe Alpine installed in them, right? And how much amount of disk usage is there across the infrastructure, right? So I would see that how he is approaching that solution, right?
Okay.
How is
Approach
he
is more important.
approach is more important, right? He might be giving me some raw solution, right? He might tell me that, okay, I'll SSH, right, to a server and I will find out, right? Then my next question will be, okay, let's say I'll make that problem statement bigger, right? Let's say there are
Correct.
1,000 servers,
Yeah.
right?
So how
Then
to
how
do
would you
that?
do that? So if he's able to think, right, he
Hmm.
might be not be giving me a very very sophisticated tool, right? He might say, okay, I'll write a bash script, right? He might not have worked on Python, although I think in nowadays in colleges, students they start picking up these technologies early on, right?
Very earlier. Correct.
Yeah, I mean, like some of the interns we got in our team, I mean, like we were really surprised by the in-depth knowledge they had, and some of them even perform better than SD1 and SD2s. So
Nice.
so
That's
so
pretty
it
good.
depends, right? And main thing I think is that you look out for those scenarios, right? Real life scenarios which companies face in day to day. I think uh, what approach I see nowadays, that students they go and say, I want to learn Kubernetes, right? But why do you want to learn Kubernetes, right? That is what I said, that how, what, why, right? So if your
Correct.
why is not clear, then you would derive at a wrong solution, right? Maybe that company only needs a cloud administrator, right, or a cloud operations engineer, right? So there you don't need to change anything, right? You just need to manage and maybe run that thing smoothly, or maybe standardize some of the processes into that system, right? uh, so you won't get into a very advanced stack in that case.
Yeah, got it. So I think there are two more questions I have just to kind of close this. So the two questions I'll just talk about them. I mean, just now. So if somebody's in college right now, right? So in the college, what they can do to build a strong foundation? That's one part of the question. Second part is basically now people are trying to move to DevOps, right? They've spent some years in their some kind of job, let's say QA or development, something like that, right? And now they want to move to the DevOps thing, right? So both in both cases, how they can build those strong foundations and how they can kind of see that okay, they can succeed in the DevOps career in their next few years and so on.
Okay, so I think for college students, I think uh, you know you should build a habit of reading RFCs, right? You go to
Okay.
google.com, type RFC and the name of the protocol, right? You start
Okay.
reading that document, right? That is a very important step. You will know how to create documents, you will know what the protocol does, and it might be very boring, right? But you will eventually pick up things, right? uh, Similarly, there are a lot of GitHub repos, I think, where they some of very good contributors, they have mentioned uh, some of the practical questions. You might pick up those small cases, right, and try to approach that cases. If you are specifically targeting DevOps, then maybe build or think some scenario, right? Just write it on, take a notepad, write, right? That, I am an employee of this company. My company wants me to implement this. What should I do,
Oh, that's a
right?
really good suggestion, Rajdeep. Yeah, I must say that that's a very good suggestion. And one more point I just want to add there. I think in the college days, people take the subjects like OS, databases too easy, right? They just want to kind of clear it out, right? But even if you just kind
Yeah,
of spend the time in the basics there, then that book itself, right? That I think is good enough to build foundations. That's what I think as well, right? Because we
yeah.
kind
I mean,
of
like,
try to
ab-
dig too much of things and so on. But if you just look at that book and just try to fill all the assignments and the
see,
questions
what
there, right? That
what I see is that when a technology picks up, there is another technology on top of that, right? So whatever you pick, complete that first. Don't do context switching, right? If you are working on Terraform, if you have taken a target that I have to learn Terraform, please complete that end to end. If you are an expert in one tool, that is good enough. Like, I know people who just work on HashiCorp ecosystem, right? Tools of those that company, right?
mm, right, right.
uh, Similarly, if you go to these meetups, right? You go to these events where there are other people, right? Maybe they are professionals, they are college students, right? Or they have just joined a company. Interact with them, right? Understand what or why they are saying what they are saying, right? If you're not clear, ask them, right, that why did you approach to this statement, what was the reason behind it, right? Similarly, read blogs, right?
Mm.
uh,
And right
but
also, right?
Right. I mean, like, writing, I've already told, right? Uh, Rather than, first start with your diary or notepad, right? That is the best way to memorize. And first, get into the shoe of, becoming a DevOps engineer, right? If you don't visualize that, okay, this is a problem statement, then, you will actually be surprised, or you might be scared going to an interview, right? But if you have lived that scenario or situation, I think it will be more relatable to you.
Correct. So I think in the interest of time, we'll just take one question which is on the chat right now. And if you have questions, guys, please put on the chat as well. And I'll ask this one question after that, and then we are done. So there's one question on the chat here. I wanted to know if I scan my code in staging area or UAT environment, then it is useful to scan them again in the prod.
No, I think just one time, right? In your
Okay.
CI/CD cycle, or if in your delivery pipeline, right? You just need to scan it once, because it will be the same code, right? Unless until your developers are not pushing multiple branches into multiple stages, then it's not a CI/CD, right? So
Okay.
you just
Yeah.
scan it once.
And last question which I have is, where would somebody start learning about DevOps, right? Like somebody want to start, right? So where they can kind of come and start learning about
I
DevOps?
think there are
What's
very
your
good platforms now. We didn't had those, right? Yours is a very good platform, right? Cloud Yuga. Code Cloud is a very good platform.
yes?
Uh, you can find Udemy, right? Or there are a lot of good GitHub materials, right? Uh, and if you can pick up, also start a bit of scripting, right? It helps, right? It's not mandatory, but yes, it helps, right? Uh, when you have to deal with bigger problem statements, more machines, more, bigger churning, bigger data for extracting some report, it helps, right? Uh, Similarly, I think what more? I think some of the companies they offer maybe some free certification, right?
Mhm.
Enroll that, maybe not for their product, but understanding that how or how that thing is working, right? A knack of getting to know the things, right? And I think this CNCF certifications are very good actually, right? So I think after Red Hat certification, the only certification that I have attempted is CNCF, right? uh,
Yeah, that's
so
true. I know the craze of
right,
RSC in the back in
yeah,
days,
yeah,
right? And then
yeah,
now the craze of the certified of CK and
yeah,
so on, right? So I'll
absolutely.
quickly share the kind of how do you to answer the question that how do you start, right? So one thing what we are doing in Cloud Yuga is right, we are running these boot camps, and these boot camps basically run for 3 months, in which we want to kind of cover all of these basics. So our main target is kind of we'll give you a very clear path and work with you for 3 months. So not just giving a roadmap, but we just want to walk along with you so that you can, once you finish this boot camp, you would be very comfortable with all of these technologies which are mentioned here, starting with Linux, Bash, Git, Cloud and DevOps, containers, and Kubernetes overview. And then, of course, we are going to help you out with the mock interviews and the readiness. So we have run these three boot camps already. Fourth is going on. And from the first and second of the boot camps, people who have cleared our internal assessments, right, and mock interviews, they all got placed. And you can look at the different testimonials people have given. So we have bunch of people in different categories. Like we have experienced folks, we have somebody who's fresher, somebody who is trying to come back into the industry, and so on. And all of them are getting kind of good experience, and they are kind of feeling the confidence again, and then they are attacking the problem, getting the internship and the full-time jobs as well. So the next boot camp start on 7th of March, and it would be like virtual, and it would be twice a week. So we can talk about further. If you're interested, you can come back and drop a note to us. We'll be happy to kind of answer that thing to you guys. So that's kind of what I want to kind of cover in today's webinar. There's few more questions I believe on the chat. Let me just put them up. So which career pattern would you suggest? Vendor logged in path like AWS DevOps path or general one?
Okay, I don't know what general is. Uh,
Yes. Mhm.
So,
So what I'm
actually, yeah. So, I would say, see, the basics remains the same. If it's AWS or data center or any other hypervisor platform, the operating system is the same. Networking protocol is the same, right? It doesn't change, right? Definitely, the thought process when you are dealing with cloud system changes, right? You need to know how to use maybe a bunch of tools to derive at a solution, right? And that will actually open up your thought process, right? So there are AWS or any other cloud platform, they offer free tier. So you can go ahead and actually try out a few things in their platform. You can even use their platform to use a concept called as infrastructure as code, right? Just spin up a small machine, right, in free tier, or just set up a network. It won't cost you, right? So I think, the thought process, right? Whatever you achieve, right, if you write a IAC for a cloud platform, you can write a IAC for VMware ESX, right? So it doesn't matter, right? So main thing is what you pick up from that learning, right? So uh, similarly, if you are maybe, as I mentioned, if you build a problem statement around it, right,
Mhm.
and try to reproduce into any environment. If you have even maybe, I run experiments on my laptop, right, using on kind, right? So I run chaos experiments, I run different setups, I try to achieve that environment. There are other, I think, browser based platforms available where you can actually spin up an instance and try out different things. You don't even need your own system, right?
Yeah, so in our boot camp, we try to answer the question like how you can build your own cloud. So if you can answer that question, how you can build your own cloud, how to manage your own cloud, right? And once you understand that particular part, you can actually work with any other cloud because they'll be just kind of settings, some kind of understand. Of course, you have to understand, like for example, how does you connect the IAM role with other stuff like with authentication and so on, right? In the AWS thing, right? But the core remains the same, right? There are instances, there is network, and so on. So if you understand that part first, I know it would take some time to connect the dots, but it's not going to be that difficult for sure.
Yeah,
Other
yeah.
question is any tip for the career switching in IT? So if you are, so I'm assuming that you are non IT right now to come to IT. What are the tips you want to give? I'll Rasdeep. I'll also share some of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I would just reiterate, right? First thing, get the basic understanding, right? Understand what is an operating system, right? Why would you choose that operating system? What are the different protocols, right, through which any application or any, message passes between one system to the other, right? uh, Similarly, uh, as you're just starting up, you will have to gain a bit of, I won't say, get some idea about, what AWS is, right, or how the cloud platform works. Don't go straight away into some very advanced technology like Kubernetes. First, learn the basics, right? First, administer maybe just a single instance, right? One way to also nurture is that, let's say that you have learned the basics, right? You have learned about operating system, different TCP/IP protocols, right? Don't go into very advanced protocols like gRPC, right? Just stick to basic HTTP,
Yep.
HTTPS, right? FTP, SMTP, this and that, right? So just stick to the basics, and then, try to think that how can you use these technologies to solve. Let's say that you have to run your own website, right? Let's say you have to host your portfolio into some website, and you visualize that as some corporate website. How would you set up that website and how would you run that? Do that practically.
Correct.
The
So
best way
I would
to
suggest.
learn is do
Hmm.
practicals.
Yeah, so I would suggest that the first approach is to get the basics correct and somehow get the internship, right? So internship can be paid or free. So even if it is free for some time, you're not getting paid per se. That I mean by free. So that is also fine for some time, couple of months. So the approach I would take that in the switching of career, right? Understand the basics and somehow try to get an internship wherever I can in this particular cloud field, and then from there I'll kind of go on there, and that is our approach as well. So that's what the boot camp we have built. There we have like at least three female audience or the learners we have, right? They all have taken a career break because of family. Now they want to join. So one of the person who has given the interview, she cleared it and she is now doing an internship. I again told her simpler thing that you are getting an internship because after this you are going to get a name that you did an internship in DevOps rather than anything else. So I think that should be the approach there. I think that's something which where we kind of close on today. There's one more question. Any idea of a project to get into AWS and AWS? Any idea on projects to get into AWS Cloud DevOps? So there are many GitHub repositories are available on the internet. If you just search, you can get it. So I think otherwise we can come back and discuss offline. So um, thank you everyone for joining this particular webinar. I hope it was useful. If you have any feedback, comments, you can just put on the chat right now. Hope you got to learn something, and this may kind of help you plan your plan for your new career path if you're searching for that. Thanks a lot, Rajdeep, to join this particular webinar, and I believe
Thanks again
this
for having me.
is our pleasure, Rajdeep. I definitely know this particular webinar is worth watching. And then I know people take it so lightly, but once they really feel it, then they kind of see, okay, somebody has told me these things. And then they kind of could not basically kind of appreciate. I mean, you can't appreciate right now, but you appreciate later only. So if you are in a situation where you want to switch your career and you want to kind of do something, become that kind of engineer who kind of do the things in the core and then of course get highly paid, build the basics and things would come automatically, right? So that I think everybody knows per se. I thank you everyone for joining this webinar. Any feedback, any comments, do reach out. Thanks again, Rajdeep, one more time, and hope to be in touch, and then we can do these things very often. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you,
Thank you a lot.
everyone. I'll just, yeah, thank you. Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye bye all.